Um, Vika, it says that I don't have any permission.
Okay. This reference let us work on it here.
Yeah. Or if it takes time, maybe can you please share?
This way for a moment.
Okay.
Could you please try one more time? We just updated the permission here on the Gmail.
Okay, I do, but it still says.
Oh, okay. Then I'm going to help you to present the materials.
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. While waiting for Miss Vika, I'm just gonna keep talking just so that we cover the time. And as what's been introduced, I am Nove, and I'm currently studying. If you feel that I don't teach a student where I don't share the same first language with them, okay, you never know the future. I also never thought that I would be teaching Ukrainian, for example. So lately, I've been teaching some Ukrainians and some people from other places in English. And I never expected that life actually brings me here, right? So if you feel like, but I'm still studying in university, I don't feel like I'm going to teach someone who doesn't share the same language, the same first language as me. That's okay. Maybe keep this for your future. Okay, so could you please go to the next slide, because I think this one has been introduced before. I just want you to comment really quickly in the chat box if you have ever misunderstood someone in your life, or if you have ever felt misunderstood by someone in your life. You can just type yes or no really quickly in the chat box, just so that I kind of know where to continue. This is a very simple, easy question. Have you ever misunderstood someone or felt misunderstood before? By the way, sometimes I can't speak really quickly, so if that happens, could you please just comment on the chat box and say you're talking too quickly. Okay, some people have responded. Thank you for your response. Some people have responded, yes, I have. I've ever misunderstood someone, or I assume that it is also you've ever felt understood by someone. I misunderstand someone a lot, even though we share the same first language. I feel misunderstood a lot, even though we share the first language. Let alone when we use English as a medium instruction or as a lingua franca, which means you don't share any other language than English. And then that's what happens to me right now here, right? And maybe it will happen to you as well in the future. I know this happens in FFA because FFA teachers are mostly Indonesians, and the students are Koreans, and then they don't share the same first language. And then here, for me, I don't have anybody in my class from Indonesia. Definitely, I don't share the same first language. And with my students, none of them also come from Indonesia. So there are so many misunderstandings, but we're going to learn about those misunderstandings, as well as we're going to learn how to avoid them in a classroom setting, and maybe not in a classroom setting as well. I'm going to talk only a little bit about that. Could you please go to the next slide, Miss? Okay, before that, we have to agree, and I think we have kind of agreed with that communication is complex. Next slide. This one, there is a model called transmission model of communication, where communication is seen as something like throwing a ball to your friend or your interlocutor, and then they will just catch it. So it is transmission is more into like a one-way process in which a sender intentionally transmits a message to a receiver, but that's it. So the focus is on the sender and on the message. So when we communicate, this Alison McClintock say, when we communicate, we don't really care about how the receiver receives the information. What we care more is about we as a sender, we have done our part, and then we have a message that is delivered. Okay, but then this is criticized. Could you please go to the next slide? This is criticized. Why? Because humans are just complex and communication is just complex. There are so many noises when we deliver something to another person. Social context, physical, psychological, cultural, relational, and everything. These contexts must be considered when we communicate so that we don't only feel like, oh, we throw a ball and then that's it, and then hoping that they will catch it without really knowing if they really catch it the way we want them to catch it or not, right? So next slide. We will stop a little bit about the theory, and then we will go further about it later in the application part. But I'm just going to share to you a little of what I've encountered here, some examples. So when I just landed, I remember I needed to go to a bus station because I almost missed my bus. And then I asked a man in the airport, could you please tell me where the bus station is? And then he was like, oh, you go to the first floor and then turn left. And I thought I was already in the first floor because in Indonesia, ground floor is just first floor. At least in my context, I'm not sure in your context though. So I thought I was already in the first floor, but then I forgot I was not actually in Indonesia. I was in a foreign land in which ground floor is actually not a first floor. Ground floor is ground floor. And then first floor is another floor after ground floor, right? So this can create some misunderstanding. But because he gave me a context at that time, he gave me some gesture. Oh, you go to the first floor, like as if he was indicating I needed to go up and then turn left, But then I didn't bother at the time because I didn't want to keep looking for a way. I just jumped into the elevator and pressed 1. I don't care where the elevator would bring me. I just believed in the elevator. If I pressed 1, I would be in the first floor because I didn't know where is first floor, where is ground floor. Okay, next slide. And then the second example is, this is also commonly happening. When we ask a question using a negative, it will create some misunderstanding to our interlocutors or to people that we interact with. Like, for example, oh, so you're not coming to the party. If that person responding to this question only answers yes or no without giving some context, we may misinterpret them. We may misunderstand them. Oh, you're not coming to the party. No. Like, no can be, okay, they're not coming to the party. Or if someone says, oh, so you're not coming to the party. Yeah. With the flat tone and then with no context, we can misunderstand them. We don't know if they're really coming or not. But then if this is answered in a further elaboration, with a further elaboration, oh, you're not coming to the party. No, I'm afraid I cannot come to the party, or something like that. Giving more context to the answer or to the question when we communicate will help a lot. I know that some Korean friends, when we ask them negative question, they will process it longer compared to when we ask them positive question. Are you coming to the party? It's a lot easier for them to process instead of, oh, you're not coming to the party. And they will need to process, should I answer yes? Should I answer no? Okay, next slide, please. And this is actually similar to the previous one. Here, if someone says, oh, do you mind if I sit here? We are many times confused by the response because one can say, yeah, sure. She said yeah or yes, so it means that she minds, but then she said sure with like a friendly tone. So it was kind of confusing. But then again, because of the context, there is some sort of like friendliness there. So we can sense, oh, maybe that's okay if I sit here. Because she even though she said yes, she said sure after that, you know. But what I want to say here is even like a simple thing like this can create some misunderstanding. I'm just sharing a very basic thing, but then in real life it can be more than this, you know. Next slide. Okay, this happens to me about getting lunch and having lunch are truly two different things. But then in my mind, they both are just the same. So I remember I had an appointment with my friend in the library at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and then she texted me, "What do you think about breakfast? Where can I get my breakfast?" And in my mind at that time, I thought she was asking me, oh, she already brought some breakfast from home, but then she didn't know if there was any place in the library that she could eat the breakfast, that she could have the breakfast, you know. So I easily responded to her, you can just get some breakfast in the library. And then actually what I'm saying is, you can buy something in the library. That's what she interpreted. But then what I intended to say was actually, you can just eat it in the library. It's okay to eat in the library. You know, so when she arrived earlier than I did, she found that in the vending machine, she couldn't buy anything other than sandwiches. And because she was from China, she was not used to only eating sandwiches. So I felt so bad because she texted me again. She was like, hey, Nove, I don't see anything else other than sandwiches that I can't buy here. What do you mean by I can get some breakfast in the library? And I clarified what I meant. I'm so sorry. I thought you already brought your breakfast and then you wanted to have it in the library. You know, so I felt so bad because of that. And then I brought her some breakfast from home. So what I mean here is, our context, our culture, what brought me up and what brought her up from different countries were really different. And then it could lead to something more disastrous than this. Okay, next slide. And then this also happened, but not to my friend, to my student. So when I was teaching, again, I was already introduced that I got a certification from Cambridge English. Just to give a little bit of context there. The certification here is called CELTA, Certification of English Language Teaching to Adults, or now it's known as Certification of Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. So if you consider this, you can take notes of my story, because this also might happen to you. So I was teaching a group of international immigrants in the class, and then these are all very basic students. They are lower intermediate level, but I don't think they are really lower intermediate. I think they are lower than lower intermediate. You get what I mean? So I was asking them, oh, how do you read this? So the next slide is the word that I asked them to read. But then it was my mistake. Could you please go to the next slide? Yeah, this one. That was my mistake, because I asked them, how do you read this? And in one person answered my question. In his language, when you say read, he would just read the alphabet by alphabet, letter by letter. So he said something like choir or something like that, you know. But then what I intended to mean was actually choir, not choir. So I used a wrong diction there. I shouldn't have said, how do you read this? Because when I say read, in his language, in his first language, he processed it the way his first language reads. I should have said, how do you pronounce this? Maybe with an additional context in English, not in your own language, please, you know. So I should have said pronounce instead of read, okay? And then the next slide, I'm just gonna go really quick through the examples. The next slide, this happens a lot to Indonesians, and I know this happens a lot to many of my friends, international friends as well here. So my boss is so annoying. He's always asking me to do something after office hour. So I emphasize the word he, the pronoun here, because many times when we speak, we use the wrong pronoun for a wrong, let's say, gender. Okay, so we want to refer, let's say, to our male boss, female boss, but then when we use a pronoun, we say he instead of she, and that's not right grammatically, right? And it can create some misunderstanding. Let's say, actually, when you say this to your friend has already known that you have two bosses, male and female, and then he might misunderstand that you are talking about your male boss while you intended to talk about your female boss or something like that. Okay, so this can create some misunderstanding as well. Next slide. And this also happens to me. Oh my God, I always do so many create some misunderstanding with the people I'm interacting with. So I had a student in my class. She was lower than lower intermediate again, and then she just came to the UK to study English, to learn English, and to just mingle with locals. And then when she learns, because she cannot process so many words in one sentence, she only catches verbs and subject probably. So when I asked her, where do you live? Probably I say live instead of live. Probably I mispronounced the word live to be with the long sound, live, which is not right. And then because she was a new learner, she only processed verbs and subjects. She caught my word to be leave only and you leave. So she answered my question, oh, I'm gonna be here for 1 year, and after that I'm gonna go back to my country. And I was like, what are you saying? You're not answering my question. And then we tried to clarify what we meant, and then she was like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you asked me when will I leave. And I was like, no, I asked you where do you live. And then as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, maybe it was my mistake. Maybe when I said live, I said leave. So like the usage of short and long sound is really important here, especially for new learners, because maybe they only learn about phonics, even though she's like 20 years old. We cannot underestimate, because I think in some countries, they don't really speak English and they don't really learn English that as much as, let's say, you learn English in Indonesia, as much as maybe I learned English back then in Indonesia, right? So when you go out of your place right now, you never know what kind of people you will meet. And I thought it was pretty clear from my side to ask where do you live, but then because she only processed verb, and then she misinterpreted what I said, live to be leave, so she answered a wrong question, a question that I didn't ask. Okay, so next slide. Okay, I hope this is the last example. I've put so many examples. Do you want some potatoes? This happened to me when I was studying with a group of friends, and then our friend came and then asked us, oh, do you want some potatoes, guys? And then another friend of mine, he was an English person, he was, just typing some words, and then he was like, we are in a study room, why are you offering us some potatoes? But then when she actually appeared in front of us, she was actually bringing some chips, some French fries. So in her country, potato can be anything. It can be French fries, it can be like a raw potato from the market, it can be any kind of potato that you want to cook. But then from an English person, potato and French fries are two different things, right? So this created some misunderstanding as well at the time. Next slide. Okay, so if you want to read more about different countries with different difficulties, I would recommend you to go to Swan and Smith book. If you don't have the book, you can just contact me and I'll just email you the book. And this is what I captured from the book, because I thought this might be helpful for some of us. When we teach our students, we have to consider that they have built all the structure of language in their first language. I give an example of Korean students here. Let's say we want to teach them present perfect continuous tense, and we want to say, oh, it's been raining since yesterday. While in their first language, when they kind of translate it into English, it will sound like from yesterday to now, rain coming. They always miss the auxiliary verbs. And if this is like very common to happen in your classrooms, you should know that it's because their upbringing is like that. They don't use auxiliary verbs. They're not familiar with that, you know. So when we understand this context or the need of our students, it will help us more when we communicate to them. Next slide. Okay, and then next. I experience all these things, but then it will be useless if we don't talk about what can we do about it when we face it in our classrooms, in a different context probably. So the first one I want to emphasize is engage our interlocutor, engage the people we're talking to, engage them in our conversation and engage with them. So next slide. We cannot just present like the transmission model of teaching is a one-way process. No, we should know and we should agree that teaching is a transaction model where we don't communicate about realities, but our communication in a classroom helps us to construct the realities itself. So in a classroom setting, we can do this by elicitation or eliciting. Eliciting means we ask our students. So for example, this is also what happened to me and my students. I was teaching them a concept of barbecue. In Africa, barbecue is something that is very, very common to do. They do barbecue a lot. In Australia, barbecue is called Barbie. So at the time, I showed them and I let them know about barbecue. But then during the practice in the listening section, it was an Australian audio, and then it said Barbie instead of barbecue. So I had a student from Uganda. He was like, "What is Barbie? You said barbecue, and it's Barbie," and he didn't understand because I didn't give context that barbecue and Barbie are actually the same thing. In his country, Barbie is a shortened name for a lady, Barbara. So Barbara in Uganda is many times called Barbie. So he was so stressed out during the listening section because he couldn't understand what Barbie is. Because I missed the elicitation process. I missed the process of checking my students' prior knowledge. So we can do this by checking their prior knowledge. Like, let's say we give the concept of barbecue, we give a picture, and then we can ask them, what do you know about this? Do you do this in your country? The people, when they do this, do they do this inside a building or outside a building? Or those kind of questions to really measure how much your students have actually understood of a certain thing. Okay, and then the next one, elicitation will provide more, still going to the previous, elicitation will involve our students more, and we will reduce the teacher talk time and promote the student talk time. This, to some points, will build their confidence, and they will feel like, oh, they're more valued compared to other people. Compared to not being asked. They will feel more engaged in the class. Okay, next slide. Yes, going to the next slide, that's okay. Multimodal modes. Multimodal research has proven that teaching through more than one single mode has been proven to enhance students' learning. What I mean by that is Of course, you don't want to teach students only by using the textbooks. Okay, this is the textbook, you do it. But they actually, you can trigger their ideas and their understanding more through different things. It can be through drawing, it can be through games, it can be through videos. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I have this textbook and I have to finish this. No, but you have to engage them with different things. Just like what I said before, I was teaching a group of international immigrants and then teaching a concept of barbecue. I didn't give like other context other than the textbook and then the listening audio and the picture. But my students still thought barbecue is a lady, which is Barbie, which is Barbara. I didn't understand that because I was not from Uganda, and barbecue is not something that is common in Indonesia. So those kind of misunderstanding really cause some disaster. Okay, and then next slide. I don't think you opened the wrong slide, Miss Vika. I think this is the right slide. Okay. Before continuing to the third application, I want you to fill in the form in the QR code. Even though I'm not able to share my screen, but I will just let you know the result later. These are 3 questions in the link or in the slide in the Mentimeter, and then I want you to identify and to rank which one is which one. I mean, which one is the first one and which one is the second one in your context. So if you go to the slide, it will ask you to rank if you put English only as the first scale, or the second scale, or the third scale. And then I will be able to see the result of your answers. Can you access that, Miss Vika? Could you please let me know if it is accessible?
It is, Miss.
Okay. I'm gonna probably wait for like 1 or 2 minutes. I don't think it should take longer time than that. So could you please rank which one do you think helps your student best? Okay, I've got some answers here, which unfortunately I cannot share because I cannot share my screen. I don't know why. Maybe the problem is in my side, not in your side, Miss Vika. So don't feel bad about it. Okay, I've got an answer here. Some answers, not an answer. That you put using first language to some point helps students perform better. But then what if you don't share the first language? I know that in EFATA, students speak Korean at home and speak English at school. And do you need to speak Korean to your students? And then, but then now the answer becomes English only first. English only. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of a context while waiting for other people to answer the questions. When I was teaching, I was so strict into English only, please. If my students answer me in another language, in, let's say, in Indonesian, or at the time I was teaching in Makassar, or in Makassar kind of language, I would just stop and ignore them. And I'm like, no, English only. I'm not going to accept you to speak other languages here. But then the more I learned, the more I read like research studies, the more I realized that actually when we forced our students to use the second language only in our classroom, we actually don't build inclusive education in which they can be themselves. What if speaking English doesn't really represent themselves? What if they understand better when they use their first language? And those kind of things, we have to know our own context. Ms. Vika, could you please go back to the slide, and I'm just going to proceed. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Next one. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this through the point of view of your answers. Okay, the first answer, if I could, I don't know if I could share this to you in the chat box or not. But the many of you answer English only is the very, very main thing that you would put as a first rank. And that was me as well last year. I would never accept my students to speak any other language. But then, do you know that communication using a second language deals with social, relational, cultural, psychological, physical thing, just like my very, very first slides about transaction model. So when we talk about social thing, we talk about they how they feel accepted in the environment. Relational talks about our relationship with them, and culture talks about their identity. So what if when I want to speak English, when I have to speak English, I truly don't want to speak English. And I feel like if I do, my friend's gonna laugh at me and it will bring me down and I will never learn English at all. You know, those kind of questions we have to consider. And I'm not saying stand against your principal because, for example, your principal wants you to teach only English in your class. But you can give them a little bit of context. Okay, if I use 100% of English, what if my students don't understand what I'm saying? And then you can negotiate, you can negotiate and then maybe you use 80% of English and 20% of the first language if you speak the first language. But then, as long as I'm here and teaching, I don't share any first language with my students. So what can I do? I cannot do anything but Google Translate. So, you can also do a little bit of cultural learning with your students. Let's say you're teaching Koreans. You can learn like how Koreans absorb and acquire a second language. It's easier when your students are all the same ethnicity. But then when your students are from different countries, you cannot necessarily do anything unless grading your language. Some of my students, they don't understand the word symptom. They don't understand the word allergy and things like that. So I cannot do anything because I cannot literally translate them to their first language. But then what I can do is first, again, go back to the first point. I elicit it. Oh, if you're sick and then there are some red spots in your body, if you feel like you keep on sneezing and something like that, to describe the word allergy, for example. Okay, go on to the next slide, please. So that way we understand the position of our interlocutor. And then this is the more practical thing I want you to apply in your classroom. We need to scaffold and do concept checking. Next slide. What does scaffolding mean? Scaffolding here means we built up the student's knowledge. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say Sam and Paula are talking, and then Sam is like, oh, are you walking home after school today? And then Paula is like, no, my mom's going to pick me up. And maybe for you, pick me up is an easy phrase, but it was not in my case when I was teaching the lower intermediate level. Okay, next slide. I needed to teach them the concept of pick up. I want them to understand that Paula's mom is going to come with a vehicle, and then Paula's mom will not physically carry her, because some of my students think pick up is you pick something, like you pick a trash and you pick it up, and then they will assume, oh, Paula's mom is going to carry Paula physically from the school. That's not what I wanted my students to understand. I wanted them to understand that Paula's mom will not physically carry her. And then I want them to understand that pick up is not a literal phrase. It's a figurative phrase. Okay, next slide. So if I've already known, I want my students to understand those things, what can I do? So I can concept check by asking them, about this context in this sentence, do you think Paula's mom will come with a vehicle or on foot? And then they will process it in their mind. Okay, because if we pick up a trash, we can just walk, right? And then I will also ask them another question. Do you think Paula's mom will physically carry her or not in this context? Because pick up can be applied in so many contexts. But within that particular context of my example, can it be about physically carrying or not? And then lastly, I can also ask them, is pick up a literal or figurative phrase. Okay, you can create so many concept checking questions depending on your students. Next slide. And then I'm going to give you another example. This is very practical when you teach about grammar. Okay, for example, my sister is doing a course in the US at the moment. I remember when I was studying English back in Indonesia, I would always associate the word at the moment with something that is really happening, like I'm talking at the moment, you know. But then we overlook the fact that present continuous tense can also function or demonstrate a different function. Like in this case, next slide. In this case, I want my students to understand that present continuous tense can be used to describe an action that is in progress around now. Not necessarily now. It's around now, but not necessarily at the precise instant. Okay, so we want to unpack those knowledge that they have saying, oh, present continuous tense is only about something happening right now at the moment precisely. No, present continuous tense can also demonstrate another function, which is to describe something that happens around now, not necessarily at the precise instant. Next slide. So because I want to introduce a new concept of present continuous tense, I can scaffold or I can concept check by drawing a timeline. This is how we can do scaffolding. We can draw a timeline. Okay, this is past, present, and future. And then the course that my sister started doing happened around here. It already happened in the past. And then when I make the sentence, it happens in the present time. The present times reveals when the sentence is made. And then actually the course continues. And that's the function of the present continuous tense that I want to emphasize, for example. And then next slide. And then you can like draw a dash line to emphasize that the action is like continuing. And then you can concept check by asking them some question. Do you think that the course has started or not? Has the course started? Is my sister currently doing the course? Has the course started? Of course, the answer is yes. Because even though we say my sister is doing a course in the US right now, even though we say it in a present continuous form, but the course has already started. The meaning implied by the sentence is much more than the grammatical structure. Okay, has the course started? Yes, of course. Is my sister currently at the moment now doing the course or not? We don't know. But what I know that she is in the process of taking a course, right? And then the last question you can concept check is, does my sister do the course 24/7? Because trust me, some of my students think when we say my sister is doing a course at the moment, they always think that my sister is doing it like forever, like 24/7. But then we need to make sure that they don't think that way. We have to frame their perspective. That's why we need to keep asking questions. And remember, when we ask them questions, we elicit from them what they have known, and they will feel more valued compared to when we don't ask them questions, when we don't engage them in our classroom. Next slide. Okay, this is what I want us to do from the concept checking practice. Make sure that they comprehend the concepts. The course has started, but it is continuing until now and probably in the near future, even though we use present continuous tense, because present continuous tense has so many functions. And then this day, we will only focus on this one. And then the second one, my sister may not do it every day, just like what I said before. It's definitely started in the past, but it extends into the future. And then the last one, my sister can do other things during this period. She's not only doing the course 24/7, you know. Okay, next one. The conclusion and reflection, I want you to go back to the, can you go to the next slide, Ms. Vika? I want to elicit from you. I don't want to keep talking, but I want to elicit. I want to demonstrate elicitation part. I want you to post. What do you think? Can you conclude? Just share one thing that you can conclude from the sharing. I already moved to the next slide. I just asked you to share one of your takeaways from the 30-40 minutes I've been talking. And then later I will just read some of them before we jump into the question and answer. So if you can go to the link or scan the barcode and then share one of your takeaways from the sharing session. I know I might speak too quickly. I'm so sorry about it because I'm afraid I'm running out of time. So I'm still waiting for you to post at least one thing, if not one phrase, if not one word, one sentence or one phrase or one word that you think can be something you can do, or can be something you just knew, or can be something you want to keep learning about from our topic today. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of time, and later I will read some of them. Okay, so while waiting, I'm just gonna read what has appeared in my Mentimeter. Someone said the background knowledge of each student plays a huge part for their understanding about new words, concepts, and ideas. Yes, that's true. And we never know what kind of background knowledge our student has unless we ask them. They're not suddenly going to come to you, hey, miss, this is what I know about it already. No, you need to trigger them. You need to elicit from them. You need to keep asking them questions if they have known about it or not, or if they're interested about it or not, you know. And okay, the next one, scaffolding. Scaffolding is something new. Okay, so scaffolding. I actually, it was also a new concept when I learned in my certification training. What I previously knew about scaffolding is when you want your student to create something, you make sure that you provide steps for them, right? That's like a bigger picture of scaffolding. But then scaffolding can also be in a form of our interaction with our students. We cannot just ask them to, okay, present about climate change without really giving them a context of what it is, and then what do they know about it, and then what can they do about it before they present their whole ideas. So example of scaffolding can also be in a form of like drawing a timeline. We scaffold the knowledge. We don't only tell them, okay, present continuous tense can mean something that happens in the past, now, and the future, for example. They can misinterpret it. They can think that future tense can be present continuous tense, and then they will mix all the structure in their mind. And that's not what we want them to learn, right? What we want them to learn is, in this context, present continuous tense means this, and this. Okay? It's impossible to use L1 when we are not speaking the language, so we need to research the student background. Yes, definitely. I had so many difficulties teaching my students from other countries. I learned something new today that checks students' prior knowledge in full students. Okay, give some space for students to explore their own ways in constructing a knowledge. This will be more helpful in a classroom setting, but if it is in a private setting, you can contextualize this. I know that FATA is giving some teachers some knowledge or course about Korean language, just so that you position yourself in your student's place. But for like other friends who are not from FATA, you can contextualize all these things based on your own experience. Okay, Miss Vika, I think the next slide is only like references, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, all these things that I'm sharing to you are taken from like these books. And if you want to know further about them, you can just contact me and I'll just give you the references. I think that's it from me, Miss Vika, for now. And I'm just gonna over it to you.